Welcome everybody and thanks for coming. Good afternoon. This is another installation of our third of the Communicating Solidarity series of panels for the Rogers Chair series, and I'm the current Rogers Chair. My name is James Compton. I'm also a faculty member here in the Faculty of Information and Media Studies. And but before I go on to introduce our panelists, I got some business to attend to. I'd like to acknowledge that the University of Western Ontario is located on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Luanawaywak, Attawaddaron peoples, and that these lands are connected with the London Township and Sombra Treaties of 1796 and the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum. This land continues to be home to diverse Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land. Another thank you before I get to our panelists. I'd like to thank the many folks, and I probably hope I don't forget someone. There's probably people who have done things to make this happen that I'm unaware of, but some people in particular: Becky Blue, Suzanne El Shorafa, Sydney Hall, Sarah Irons, Matt Ward, our technical crew, Jeremy Ramos Foley, Ryan Travers, and Paul Buckley Golder. All these people are in various capacities have made this event possible, and so thanks very much for your efforts, because I wouldn't have been able to do it without them. Also, I'd like to say that one of our four panelists unfortunately cannot be here with us. Patty Dalton, who is the president of the London and District Labour Council and a current member of the Ontario Federation of Labour Executive. I'm sorry she can't be here. Very knowledgeable person. She has family emergencies that she's got to deal with, and so we will miss Patty, but we'll continue on. And so what I thought I'd do is introduce the three panelists briefly, and then they're going to say a few words, and I want to have a discussion and have Q&A after. This is a very like I've been planning this for months, but as it happens, very timely for this campus, given that in the last year we've had 3 strikes in this university, and involving, and Karuna is going to talk about one of them in particular. But I'd like to say first that it's interesting. I've never been on a panel where I can say off the beginning that I have walked picket lines with all 3 of the people here. In fact, I think I'm right. I've been working with Peter for a long time. But I think the first time we met was when you were the president at St. FX, and you were on strike, and I flew in with the flying pickets, and that's the first time we met. It's the first time I met Evan in Montreal in May. It wasn't the first time. The first time I met Karuna was actually at a May Day event where she was a speaker and gave this brilliant labor theory of value critique of graduate student labor, and I thought, oh, who's she? She's smart. And then so I went and introduced myself. It turns out she's one of our PhD students, no longer. She was so good that PSAC snapped her up. And so I begin with Peter. So Peter McInnis is a member of the Department of History at St. FX. And he's been active in faculty unions for 25 years, and he served on the executive committee of the Canadian Association of University Teachers since 2014, including 4 years as chair of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, and Peter now is in his 3rd and final year as president of the CAUT. Evan Fox Decent is president of the Association of McGill Professors of Law. He was also named Canada Research Chair Tier 1 in Cosmopolitan Law and Justice in October of 2019. He teaches and publishes in legal theory, political theory, private law, public law, and international law. And it also happens, has learned to become a very good union leader, which he's going to talk to us about today. And Karuna D'Souza is past president of PSAC 610 here at Western. Karuna was deeply involved in the mobilization of teaching assistants from 2020 to 2023. And this has been a major focus for her. And she was very much involved in the solidarity efforts of that union. And of course, they had a strike here in the spring. And she's currently staffer, as I mentioned, at the Public Service Alliance of Canada and working out of their regional office. And so I'll begin. Peter's going to start us off. I asked Peter to introduce for us the idea of the neoliberal university, the state of it, where we're at in its relationship to solidarity, and what the CAUT has been doing about that. Not a little bit to cover, but he'll manage.
Thank you, James, and thank you for this opportunity to speak at this university, of which I am an alumnus, as are several generations of my immediate and extended family. We all graduated from an institution closely connected with this region, but I must say I remain a little bit perplexed as to why, possibly in a neoliberal flourish of marketing, it was rebranded simply as Western, to the casual observer implying imprecise location, possibly in Saskatchewan or British Columbia, transnational, intergalactic, and not the distinctive geography of this cultural heritage of the southwestern part of the province. So many thanks for occasioning my return to the University of Western Ontario. The debate on how to communicate and sustain solidarity in a neoliberal university is pertinent as we enter the second quarter of the 21st century, but some historical context is important. Arguably, the two foundational innovations for Canada from the 1960s onward were the advent of public health care and the expansion of post-secondary education. The massive public investments made by federal and provincial governments in these two areas have been crucial as social determinants of health for post-war generations. Access to the basic health care through the adoption of Medicare has vastly improved the quality of life and extended longevity. Healthcare alone, though, is insufficient for maintaining and expanding outcomes, if not teamed with access to quality higher education. Those lacking the necessary training and career pathways cannot achieve the desired social mobility and participate actively in a robust democracy. So this was a system built in the last 60 plus years, and it spurred rapid development. And it's worth noting here, and I was doing a little bit of research, if a partial list of the universities created from that period onward would include Victoria, if I went to east, from west to east, Victoria, Simon Fraser, Calgary, Lethbridge, Regina, Winnipeg, Windsor, York, U of T Scarborough, U of T Mississauga, Trent, Sherbrooke, Moncton, Prince Edward Island, Cape Breton, and Memorial. So this was a very impressive thing, and it's something that we should be mindful in terms of trying to sustain it as we enter, as I said, into the latter phases of this century. Established universities like UWO were expanded to adopt emerging fields of research and teaching while admitting a broader spectrum of marginalized students with respect to gender, race, and class. So when I started at Western in the early 1980s, it was much different than I just saw on campus. So things have changed, and that's largely for the better. Consequently, from the 1960s onward, Canada came to expect a reasonable delivery of health care from prenatal to geriatric, and that they and their children could be educated in comprehensive areas of interest and expertise without incurring massive personal debt for either service. And you can't say that now. So this halcyon age, if you want to call it, in the intervening decades has left us with a far different contemporary landscape. The core of research, teaching, and service are now under considerable duress as the managed neoliberal university becomes ubiquitous mode of delivery. So definitions of neoliberalism are readily available, and the academic literature is now voluminous. But if we cite one of the leading scholars, Wendy Brown, of the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, neoliberalism encompasses linking our institutions to marketization, deregulation, privatization of public services, regressive taxation, and sharp limits on social spending, all culminating in the radical transformation in the real functions of the public university as distinct from their usually anodyne mission statements. Professor Brown describes neoliberalism as a, quote, termite-like ideology that bores into one's mind to undermine the imagining of democratic alternatives. Challenges to solidarity are many, and I want to turn to that now, but liberal tenets emphasize internal and external competitiveness. So faculty come to see themselves as rivals, scrambling to secure grants, fellowships, tenure, promotion, and overall distinction. Emphasis on individuality undermines the university's collective initiatives and common goals, so solidarity in short. It's been noted that the neoliberal university accentuate widespread anxiety of continued performance in obtaining funding, publishing in top-level journals, prestigious university presses, incessantly updating one's CV, and augmenting the annual activity reports. The example that we can draw from this is in Britain, the United Kingdom, the Research Excellence Framework and the Teaching Excellence Framework, REF and TEF for short, and this relentless application of metrics to all facets of the profession has led to a widespread crisis in mental health. So one of the barriers to overcoming solidarity is the anxiety of working in this profession at the present time, often resulting in a withdrawal from public-facing collective actions because people are dealing with this mental issue privately. One of the researchers that's interesting to look for is a sociologist at the University of Ottawa, Ivy Bourgeot, and her research team, who points out that in many cases, faculty having obtained sabbaticals are using them as de facto health breaks, or LTDs. So the widespread use of course evaluations probably ramps this up as well. The industry now disingenuously terms these student perception surveys, and heightened workplace anxiety. And even though this is as we know, a methodologically dubious metric of performance, but some students, not all, but some were saying, here we are now, entertain us. Thus, the neoliberal university promises innovation, but often yields conformity, as those subject to the course evaluations may wish to play it safe with risk-averse pedagogies or engage in grade inflation to achieve consumer satisfaction. But as we also note from the last 5 years, faculty are presumed to be work-ready employees who must personally assume the responsibilities for nonstop job training, that is adopting to every edtech innovation from online teaching to addressing the ramifications of artificial intelligence. Then any failure to succeed is an individual failure deserving some form of sanction. So the expectation of what you may be familiar with this in the business context, the Japanese term Kaizen like continuous improvement, may take various forms. Just last week, my university sent out an email breathlessly touting a new platform called My Campus, to which faculty are supposed to post their latest achievements, awards, and distinction. This kind of social media expectations results what I would term academic FOMO, fear of missing out. And we are encouraging to assiduously, as one colleague said, somewhat snarkily, attend our rock gardens of self-esteem on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, or even The Conversation, which is a bit more legit. And then this in turn would be amplified by the university and promoting its visibility. So I think this is an important point. These are barriers that fragment us and add to the anxiety of the profession. And solidarity becomes something that is a goal, but it may be harder to achieve in the moment unless we think alternatively. So the neoliberal university values most applied skills, demonstrable knowledge transfer. At least at my university, we're encouraged to demonstrate our knowledge transfer. And the expectation is to jump aboard this bandwagon of self-promotion, enhancing our human capital as verification of the ongoing value to the employer. You also note, and of course this has been going on for some years now, the annual Maclean's magazine rankings have come out, but you may note that the incoherence of the institutional scores. And the Western always rates lower in the medical doctoral category than you would think it would be. I know I visit a lot of universities nationally. Some of the ones that have gravitated from the bottom, it just seems to be very odd that they're at the top of this list all of a sudden. And we are advised that this process is routinely gamed and manipulated in what the notable drama series The Wire called Juking the Stats. Yet rankings matter in the neoliberal ethos as investment decisions, whether the student enrollment, attracting private donations, or securing tri-council funding may rest on the positioning on these lists. So I wrote a little bit, and I'll just parse it really quickly, about funding higher education. You all know that Ontario is a laggard in this respect. Less than 24%, that's the latest figure I have, is funded by the provincial government compared to the 35% national average, but that tends to be gravitating downward in every province. And its replacement by massively increased tuition, domestic students, international students, professional programs, has also led to an increased reliance on private donors and endowment. Some faculty stand to benefit, and some will stand to lose. Some that object to some donations may incur the wrath of their administration. So what I'm saying is the neoliberal university sets up winners and losers internally and externally. In other instances, provincial funding is targeted to selected disciplines. Certainly the Ford government has done that in Ontario. But also we're seeing a disaggregation of knowledge. You could argue that generative AI in the form of ChatGPT or similar large language models is an ideal expression of neoliberalism as it bypasses the rigor of autodidactic learning. You can ask it to develop an instant précis, streamlines or compresses progression to a degree. In this case, the end justifies the means. Pedagogic challenges mounted by AI are largely left to faculty to resolve. And I think most universities, is probably the case here at Western, there's been some help dealing with AI, but a lot of it in the end comes down to individual faculty. And I've had to, as an historian, rethink a lot of my assignments, and it causes me anxiety, and it's a challenge. Also worth mentioning here very briefly, micro-credentials. The thoroughly neoliberal Higher Education Quality Council of Ontario, their acronym is HECO, are touting these, have been for years. The assumption that one can learn some discrete elements of knowledge, such as critical thinking, almost you'd add this to a sash, maybe a little badge, means that you would take this course and learn your critical thinking badge and then not repeat it. But we know that students benefit from learning in other disciplines and repetition of learning. So this idea of compressing the degree is quite problematic. And if you're interested in looking at a study, Audrey Waters, The Teaching Machines, published several years ago, The History of the Personalized Learning is an interesting example of this. So students need to enhance their value of the labor market, and also academic freedom is challenged by the neoliberal university. One example is research ethics boards. Often internally at universities we're finding this nationally, interpreting the TCPS2 advisory in a very strict way, a very risk-adverse, and questioning not only is this research going to cause harm, but will this affect the reputation of the university, which is an overstep, you could say. So the delegitimization of dissent is another area. So in terms of answer to this, solidarity, it takes, of course, many forms, but what we have advocated as a national association and the Canadian Association of University Teachers is what we call the organizational model, the organizing model of trying to build capacity at the lower level. This has also been described as the ladder of engagement, because you can't ask somebody to assume, say, the presidency of UOFA if they haven't been a steward or taken some other positions. But what is interesting, and I would argue in terms of solidarity, is it is, as James said, I've been involved in this for now over 25 years, it is, I find, something quite fundamentally important and part of what I would describe the holistic academic job. It's not tertiary to my job, it's in addition to research and teaching, but it's fundamentally important. So service, which has been marginalized in the sort of ludicrous 40-40-20 triad, it needs to be resurfaced and recentered. And there may be some parts of your academic career where you're emphasizing the service aspect more, and that is an opportunity to build solidarity on campus. So the organizing model tries to build that capacity, and so that is in distinction, and perhaps Karuna can say something about that, to the servicing model. Many private sector, public sector unions service their union members, will come in and give them support. We do that to a certain extent, but obviously with over 72,000 members and 125 institutions, both universities, colleges, we can't be everywhere. So we need to build that capacity. So sustaining solidarity in that sense involves, of course, collective bargaining, governance, equity, shared governance, indigenization. So we offer training, both asynchronous and synchronous online courses, in-person sessions, and we've been using the train-the-trainer approach to build that capacity at the level of the university. This has mixed success. We're hearing that it is successful in some cases. Other academics see themselves as professional. They don't want to use the term union or even faculty association. It may be something they need to overcome in the sense that they are not just individual actors, but they are part of a collectivity. And if you keep in mind, as I started with the value of the edifice of the public university established in Canada, it is something worth protecting. When I go to international events, I often speak with colleagues at other universities in the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, many other countries. Canada has probably got, I don't know how you measure this exactly, but of the best deals in terms of the best arrangements to support the principles of academic freedom, collegial governance. It is the envy of many other nations. And so the asking is, how did you do this, and how do we get these rights back if we lost them or gained them in the first place? And it's very poignant at times when I'm at a colleague from the Philippines or Argentina saying, if we say the things that you do in public, we may end up arrested or worse. In the Philippines, it's a risk of a death threat. So the CAT Defense Fund supports members and has supported UAFA members in the past. And just next month, we will admit the University of Sherbrooke officially to our membership, and that will be the complete coverage of all Quebecois academics in certified professional unions. And we, as I said, liaise with our counterparts, the American Association of University Professors, University and College Union in the United Kingdom. But solidarity is more than an abstract concept. It is something that we certainly can achieve, and we can overcome the neoliberal university. It may be ubiquitous, but it's not insurmountable. So I would very much encourage you to take up that. And if you have some other questions, maybe that can come out in the Q&A. So thank you very much. Ran over a bit.
Thanks, Peter. And now Evan, I think I've asked Evan to give us a short version of the extraordinary story of his union. McGill is now unionized, and the other faculty associations, it's spreading, right? And this is unique, and if Evan hadn't been successful, you want to turn your mic off there, Peter? Oh, good.
It's mine, sorry.
If Evan and his union had not been successful, all the other unionization efforts would have started to collapse. They're now thriving, and Evan's going to explain this for us. Thanks very much, Evan.
Thank you very much, James. Karuna, Peter, thank you. And thank you to everyone for being here today, to everyone who's helped to set this up, and in particular, James, for the invitation. So we at McGill, and in particular at my faculty, have been living through a live experiment, if you will, in solidarity over the last 3 years. What I'd like to do is speak to a little bit about what we saw as an encroaching, unfriendly, unwelcome, neoliberal experience at McGill, and how this, in the midst of COVID, compelled us to organize ourselves into a certified faculty association, and then what it's looked like since we first filed for certification. So I just have 15 minutes. It's going to be just the broadest of brushstrokes. But let me just say I can reaffirm and confirm everything Peter said, and that I'm sure you are living through in terms of the push that we feel sometimes from university administrators and higher senior administration toward greater centralization, toward taking over scheduling classes, scheduling where classes will take place, at what point in time they will take place, taking over the determination of program requirements for student entry, and so forth, and taking over large questions too that might have to do with the welfare of either academic staff or non-academic staff at a particular institution. So at my institution, McGill University, like everyone else, we went through the Great Recession, 2007, 2008. Following the Great Recession, there was across Canada and indeed across the world a great retrenchment of pensions by large corporate private interests and by large public institutions across the world. In Canada, attempted to roll back or claw back what had historically been defined benefit pensions, which means essentially when you retire, you become a retiree and you enjoy roughly 70% of the best 5 years of income or salary that you enjoyed at your institution. Not surprisingly, universities attempted to roll these pensions back and convert them from defined benefit pensions into defined contribution pensions, which means when you retire, instead of becoming a retiree with a guaranteed income until you pass, you become essentially a portfolio manager. You get a lump of money and you have to decide how to invest it. And then at that point, the risk is on you if there's a market crash. Now, there's a lot that can be said about this, but one of the most important things that I noticed as I had just started at McGill in 2005, and this came around 2008 or 2009, was that when the McGill's administration suggested to us, we're going to change, they didn't say, make worse or degrade in any way, but change or alter your pension. You're no longer going to have a defined benefit pension or a pension that is largely composed of that, but now it's going to be defined contribution, and there are certain advantages to this. There was, in Senate, there were a few people asking questions about this, but there was no real resistance. And what I came to learn in the years, and so our pension was essentially changed from a pension that was defined benefit or protected like a defined benefit pension to the stock market pension. What I discovered when I spoke to colleagues at other universities is that they had these pesky things called unions that got in the way of administrations that wanted to roll back those pensions. And I thought, oh, maybe we have something like that. Well, it turns out we didn't have anything like that. We do have an association, but it's an association set up on a model that is not the faculty association model that you may be familiar with, that involves collective bargaining and collective agreements. We have a model that is set up on the basis of when you, in my case, as an academic, come to McGill and are hired, you're given usually a one-page, sometimes a page and a half, letter of appointment, and the letter of appointment simply says, you are from this day forward subject to the regulations and policies of McGill University. Sign here. That is the extent of our contractual employment relationship with McGill, and there are about 1,700 profs, so there are 1,700 of these relations, but they're all individual relationships. They're all relationships of the individual to the institution. And as you might imagine, there's drastically asymmetrical bargaining power between even the brightest and best and most sought after individuals and the institution. And when things, when something produces friction or things are not going well, This sort of imbalance shows itself with colleagues, even colleagues with tenure, facing reprisals, discipline, and even dismissal in contexts that they would never face dismissal in another university setting with a collective agreement. So between these sort of large issues that were hanging over us, the growing centralization and I would say a growing unease of us as colleagues having any real sense of collegiality and solidarity with one another for the very reasons that Peter provided. We are all on a treadmill to produce, to publish in the best journals, to get teaching evaluations and course evaluations as high as we can from students who may or may not be assessing us on the quality of our teaching. They may be assessing us on, did you bring cookies, or take them out for drinks, or do something of this nature. This produced in our faculty a real sense that something had to change, and this came to a head in COVID, when in the fall of 2021, with vaccines only just really coming out, a lot of people being resisting taking the vaccines. A number of us signed a petition to our administration with members of our medical faculties and infectious disease specialists, petitioning and saying, please provide some sort of a vaccination requirement, and we'll do hybrid teaching so people who can't or just choose not to take a vaccine can nevertheless be instructed by Zoom. The university decided they would not do this. They wanted everybody back in the classrooms, even people about whom there were real health vulnerabilities. And it came to pass on August 29th of 2021, that our provost sent around a memo asking for the names of people who were professors who were seeking accommodation to teach remotely, and setting out the limitations on those accommodations. And one of those limitations was that an accommodation should not be granted to somebody whose a family member faces a risk of a health consequence as a result of catching COVID, even somebody living under the same roof as this colleague. And that, I think, galvanized people to understand that there really is now, in a way that we at least at McGill, for the 20 years I had not seen before, a significant separation of the administration, which historically had come from professors, and the professoriate, as well as non-academic staff. And it was at that time we decided to organize ourselves and seek certification. And so that was what we did. In Quebec, Quebec is referred to as a card check jurisdiction. So we went around sort of one by one and discussed the idea of forming a certified faculty association, a union, with a number of our members, and with over a 2/3 majority. You need 50% plus one, but we wanted to have a majority that we could say was sufficient in most democratic places to change a constitution. And with that sort of a number, we filed for certification. But we thought that the organizing part was going to be difficult. There were many repeat visits and one-on-one discussions and meetings with many of our members who, although they couldn't stand the administration, were very skeptical and suspicious about creating a formal faculty association. How is this going to work? Who's going to run it? All sorts of questions and doubts that had to be addressed. Nevertheless, within 6 weeks, we got there. But then really the fight was just beginning. And from that point on, McGill fought us tooth and nail every step of the way. beginning with certification. McGill immediately filed an objection to our certification with the Labor Board, saying you can't possibly certify a single faculty, it has to be the entire university. And it was only with the solidarity and the support of CAUT that we were able to enjoy the funds to pay a lawyer to defend us, who would ultimately win the case and receive a 20-page sort of condemnatory judgment from the Labor Board judge, saying that McGill's arguments just held no water. As soon as we were certified, November of 2022, within the 30-day time limit, McGill filed a petition to decertify us at Superior Court. So an application for judicial review to decertify us, but at the same time, McGill had an obligation to bargain with us, and so we began bargaining with McGill. Now, as you might imagine, with McGill waiting for this judicial review hearing to come around, which would not be set down to be heard for 2 years, we faced constant foot-dragging, delays, cancellation of meetings, extreme difficulty making any progress on various aspects of a collective agreement. But nevertheless, by hook and by crook, we did manage to get some 15 or 16 articles of a collective agreement solidified. Finally, McGill dug in its heels and was refusing to meet with us more than once every 6 weeks. For the first time ever in the history of McGill, we called colleagues together and they voted a strike mandate, giving the executive a mandate to take up to 5 days of strike in December of 2023. We took the first day of strike when McGill refused to meet with us and negotiate in good faith again. On February 13th of 2024, McGill was still foot-dragging, and eventually we would have a General Assembly and our members would vote for an unlimited strike to begin in April. And so we launched an unlimited strike in April, on April 24th, and that strike took us through graduation and through the largest academic meeting in Canada, which is an academic meeting of the Federation of Social Science and Humanities that year was set down to take place at McGill. We thought that if we struck grading so that law students could not graduate in May and imperiled this large conference, that would surely bring McGill back to the table. I regret to say it did not. It did not. McGill decided that rather than sit down with us and negotiate a collective agreement, they would simply graduate students who did not have marks and did not have grades. So students were given degrees with grades still outstanding and no proper assessment of what grade they would have had, they had or would have had on their final exams. With the conference, with the Congress of the Federation, McGill again closed us off, refused to meet with us, and when they finally did meet with us in June, it was only to stonewall, and then shortly thereafter asked the government to put us into arbitration to resist the possibility of us going on strike in the fall. Well, with the summer coming and no leverage available, we suspended the strike on June 20th, but we told McGill that if he didn't negotiate seriously with us at the end of the summer, in early September, we would relaunch the strike. And the one thing we did get from the strike were 4 days for negotiation, 3 at the end of August, 1 in early September. We went to negotiate with McGill on the first of those days, and they stood us up. They simply did not come. They didn't come the second day. And shortly thereafter, we relaunched the strike, and now it was a very different thing because students' classes were canceled. Students who had come in from across Canada. We were very fortunate throughout the spring and now again in the fall to enjoy the support of, Peter mentioned it just in passing, but it really can't be overstated, not just CAUT, but the CAUT Defense Fund and the Flying Pickets. So the Flying Pickets are a group that typically brings in someone from the executive. So Peter, you were there at least 2 or 3 times. 5 times. So frequent flyers. James was there a handful of times, at least, several times. 6 times. So these were like heavy, frequent flyers. We had Hassan from York who was there, I think, all but on one of the occasions. And so this was a 13, 14-week strike that 10 to 12 colleagues from across Canada, from British Columbia, out to the Maritimes, would fly in, pump up our tires, help us mount a picket line and protest outside the law faculty, outside the administration building, where central administration is. And that was the kind of solidarity that allowed us, as really a tiny faculty, right, a faculty of 45 law profs, 15 of whom are either on sabbatical, on medical leave, or living outside of the country. So in reality, like 30 at most we could call on to mount picket lines. It allowed us to have the kind of energy and commitment to push through to where we thought we would eventually go and end up. And where we had eventually ended up was McGill saying, that's enough. We're going to sit down and we're going to negotiate with you seriously. And what we were able to achieve through the strike were head-to-head negotiations with the provost himself over 5 days, during which we obtained, they dropped the judicial review challenge, their challenge to decertify us. They dropped their legal challenge to the new union in arts, the Faculty of Arts that is formed. They dropped their challenge to the union, the new union that's formed in education. And they agreed to work with us, the 3 unions now that are there at McGill and more coming, in a confederation where, as a confederation, we can bargain university-wide manners collectively with the university. So we get strength of numbers on that basis, but even better, once we make agreements on various matters with the university, we actually take those back in our own collective agreements to our members, who of course then have to ratify it. So we get the strength of numbers, but the autonomy of the local by having unions in our particular faculties. And what I can tell you is the sense of solidarity and working together, the engagement, the ladder of engagement, and mobilizing people, and having people who had never imagined they would join a union, certainly not at McGill, coming out on a picket line, blocking postal deliveries, writing letters, taking part in solidarity phone banks, and doing all manner of activity that was supported by CAUT and a provincial counterpart that does work very much like CAUT, the Fédération Québécoise de Professeurs et Professeuses. That kind of solidarity, without it, it would have been impossible for us to organize, and it would have been, I think, impossible for education, arts, and the remainder of McGill now to organize. It really only is solidarity and the power of numbers that has made it possible, and made it possible for us now to remember why, more than anything, we are doing this. And this is what I shared with the General Assembly of Arts that just met a week ago. They are now just being freshly certified, and that is difficult as the struggles are that we will have with neoliberal universities, even together, in unions that are robust and strong, and there will be many struggles. The one thing that you will never do while you're in a union, as opposed to when you're not one, is beg. We will never go back to begging. That's why I told arts, and that's why I told education. The days of begging and individual cap in handing to senior administrators are over. From here forward, it's bargaining. And the way we bargain is we bargain together, and the reason bargaining works is because we have solidarity and the support of ourselves and the support of our brothers and sisters behind us. Anyway, thank you very much, James, for this.
Thank you very much, Evan. Now, Karuna is going to be next. And as you know, I know that some of the people in this room were participants in the GTA strike. And so there's some keen interest in the room, and Karuna was the key organizer for PSAC 610. So please welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take credit for that, but I did quit the union in November, I think. But I will take credit for the previous 3 years in which I was involved, which led to, I think, a group being active in the university. So I feel like I was there, but I was actually strike admin when the strike was going on, but my heart was with them. So because I took up a job with PSAC and they were paying me better, and precarious work is difficult, as we all know. So I'm just going to lay that out there as to start off with, just kind of want to go, first of all, this is a bittersweet kind of a time for me to be speaking here. I just graduated with a master's. I intended to do a PhD, but quit because it was precarious and difficult, and because I got involved in the union. So for me, this is coming back to home ground after many years. This is the first public kind of talk that I am, so I'm like grateful to James, who didn't know about all of this and just invited me because, so this is I'm quite happy to be here. Now, I came in as an international student in 2018 into the university as a master's student and transferred to a PhD program. I came from India, and I came completely sort of new and thinking that you're coming to the West to study, and this is going to be an interesting experience, and the level of education and all of that, like the myths kind of were very much present. When I came here, I realized I had no money. I had to pay for my master's initially because it's expensive, and a lot of time went into things that were academic adjacent. And that surprised me because I grew up with the background that when you're studying, like you're in a program. That's what your mind. You're not working to be a part of it. So that kind of got me involved into seeing what spaces that existed. One was, and be very honest here, was to earn money, because there were union positions that were there where you could earn a little bit and also contribute. And so fairly selfishly, I kind of got into the union. Also lost the first election, then got a claim because the person didn't want to take. So there's a lot of interesting ways in which I kind of got involved in the union, and that I'm talking about this because it's important to say, what is the union in terms of its image, in terms of its a place for you where you feel like that you identify and you want to be part of. And that for me was the central idea in which I came into the union. I said, if I saw the space as not being as welcoming of me, then I want to change it and transform it into a place where me as an international student, no background, can come there and say, this is a space where I can be readily welcomed. And that governed, I think, a lot of the 3 years and it also was a shift, a mind shift, because when we talk of service, but the idea of service is very different from a union logic in my mind, because I came from a not-for-profit kind of a background, and that's very different. You're kind of working with, but here you are doing the work. And that is a very different perspective that a union logic presents to you. And the pandemic, which we got into, and when I got involved in the union, made it a lot more easier to access meetings. I know there's a huge problem with being online, and it's easier, but it's less engagement. But as somebody who was not part of a lot of the groups that existed, online gave me an opportunity to be part of a lot of PSAC union events that I normally would not have been able to access. It just, because the pandemic also gave you more time, you were at home, you could attend courses with PSAC, and just little things that sort of built into the education aspect. So that kind of brought in the shape of how I got involved in PSAC 610. And now I'll talk a little bit about the unique nature of teaching assistants. Not like faculty, very different from faculty, very different from facilities management and all of the other unions on campus, because most of them, I'm not saying all of them, have full-time jobs. You're associated, or you intend to have a full-time job with the university. Closest, I think, would be to adjunct professors, to limited duties professors, which is precarious work but there is still a slight difference, because you have students who are here not teaching, not necessarily by choice. This is part of your program. So you're doing labor, you're part of this group, but you're kind of, your ultimate aim of being in the university is your research. So it's compulsory labor, and we have to look at it in that perspective. It's not, because then the university loves to put it in this position that, oh, like, we're doing a favor for you by allowing you to teach. You know, we're giving you money so that you can fund your, but I think we need to reframe that, and I'll get a little bit into that also. This is a transient labor group in the university. This is the most beautiful part of it, and also the most problematic. Because when a transient group comes in, they can say whatever they want. They have no ties that's going to attach them for a long time. You don't have to be so nice to people that, you know, like 10 years down the line, it's not going to bite you in the ass afterwards. Like, you know, like that's the, like I know from moving to a sort of a teaching assistant kind of a role to now being full-time at a work institution, my responses are quite different to people. And, you know, you weigh those considerations. Also, it means that you can be more political. So this is the loss is that you don't have a sense of history. But I think sometimes that's also good, because you're not weighed down by a certain perspective of the past that existed. And I think I came in like that, because I didn't have too much of the previous history of 610 and what they did. And it was only as we were doing things that I heard bits and pieces, and I heard both. I heard this is what, like, the union was a very inactive one, to, you know, like being so active that they had issues with, you know, like there were lots of political issues, and they tried to unionize groups at some point of time. So, you know, there was a mixture of things. Now, it was a hard thing to kind of put all the work that we had done, you know, as part of the union. So I just kind of put a bucket list here of all the key things, but I said, let's look at this. I'll go through each one, like in little, not in detail, but just to get a sense of a pattern around it as to what were the strategies that kind of brought us to where we, like, you know, to the mobilized group that we were, and the work and continuing. So in 2020, pandemic, Black Lives Matter, the university had this entire turn towards being more decolonized, and EDI were words being thrown about and still being thrown about. So we were like, okay, so this is something that we can focus on. I was elected into the racial equity positions. So this is, but then more and more I saw that a lot of the international students were racialized. Like that's the cross-cutting issues, right? And with international students, things are more precarious. You don't come here with necessarily support systems. You don't have adequate academic funding. You may not have family support. You come to a completely different way of functioning, and you know, like a whole system that is new to you. And so, and a lot of people had come up with issues, and there was a drive. Then we said, okay, why don't we look at unionizing international students, like as a not necessarily a union in the way that like had legal power, but as an association, as a group. So the university will have to negotiate with them, and like, you know, that was very difficult. It did not. We we tried many things, and it's a difficult thing because your status, your PR status, your international, your study permit is all attached to it. So that didn't work out, but it helped in getting students to understand that there could be a drive, like, you know, that the union, that we were all part of the union. So it framed some of the conversations that we started to have. And then we looked at housing as an issue simply because Bayfield Hall, which was meant for graduate students, had been suddenly overnight been told that they were going to go to undergraduate students with no logic or anything like that. And the union, like, then with whatever power that we had, we just said that no, that we're going to do something, like we'll go to the press or we'll do something about this if you do this. The university said, y'all are not employees. I mean, y'all are employees. We don't have an obligation to give you housing. So this is out of this thing. But they said, we are also students. We also need to survive, and this is, and housing rent prices were increasing at that point of time. ultimately went to the Board of Governors. There was actions and things like that. But, and they put a stay on Bayfield Hall. Now that was a big win for us in terms of the union's perspective, like for the way that people perceived the union. Because it suddenly felt that, the union is us and we are standing together. And along with that, there was also a drive. So I think we really tried a lot of things. There was multiple things happening at the same time. We had graduate student assistants who were being paid less than the TA wage, and research assistants, and we were saying, okay, let's unionize them. So there was a drive for unionizing them, which sort of gave the union and people more talking points. It also gave us some money from PSAC. Like, this is also the economics of it, right? So because we could get some money from PSAC, say that this is a mobilization drive, it also taught us language about what being in a union means, because we suddenly had to learn that, the communication. Then Feb 2022 was the end graduate student poverty. And I think we just did this as we just fed up with what the situation is, and we said, okay, come, let's just have a rally. And I remember one day at the grad club, 6 or 7 of us said, how do we do a rally? We don't know. Okay, let's call somebody from PSAC. Maybe they will tell us. And Morgan, my colleague, came and said, yeah, so we need a couple of flags. We need this. Who are your speakers? Okay, where do you want to hold it? And this was it. And within 2 weeks, we had this rally. We were surprised actually at the uptake of this. We had other unions came out. The press took it up quite a bit because the press loved the word poverty and then graduate students. But it also gave us an opportunity to articulate what the main issue was, which was the graduate students were earning less than minimum wage, and which was true. So it was poverty in that. But that articulation then gave us, so it got more people involved. And then it moved from basically international students, racial equity, so you had more, beyond international students, also domestic students getting involved, which I think was a strategic mistake, and you always see in hindsight, but in terms of building solidarity, right? Like, you want to get all groups involved. It's not pitting one against the other. And it wasn't pitting, but it framed it in a way that you felt that probably the domestic students felt excluded. And I think that in communication is really important to explain and say why, what is the logic. And we also had, and we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but there was also a political climate where it was like strikes were what was happening. We almost went on a general strike in Ontario at that point of time with educational assistance. So that was also the political climate in. After that, there was this shift. And the shift happened in terms of communication with the Save Our Science rally that happened in May. I think it was in May of 2023, a little earlier, where, because it was about research and because it was looking at graduate student funding that had not changed for the last 20 years, we, you started thinking about it and you said, okay, why are we here? And I go back to why teaching assistants are here. And so then we went back into research, and then we said, okay, what is research to the university? It's central to the university because that's what professors are doing, that's what students are doing, that's what the entire support system that exists around the university, is for research. And so our communication, and we were able to get to the crux of why we're here, and that's the labor theory of value. And we were like, oh, it makes sense to us because this is what we feel. And it sort of articulated exactly what we felt as students and being here and graduate teaching assistants. So there's a poster there from Respect Our Research, which was pretty much what that articulated. But it hit a nerve with all groups on campus. I think OFA took that up. We had QP facilities management talking to us and saying yes, because it brought them into the fold of saying why they are important in the university. So we are all together with this idea of, and then, so now this is now at the thinking level. Let's say, the feeling identified with the union and from a perspective, front. It was the engineers' strike, who were 12 people on campus. They're a group of 12 people. And they went on strike, and every other union said, you'll have 12 going out on strike? We've not heard of this happen. And so every union, and I say with QP's actual, ground level organizing skills, every union on campus, OFA, OSA, even OSA, who generally doesn't come out to events, came out to this particular. For 1 hour in the afternoon, we walked down Western University and stopped traffic. It was a moment, these moments kind of govern where, like, it was not planned. It was a rally that was called, in the morning. I remember going and saying, okay, there is something at 12 o'clock. Organic. We stopped traffic. University was so upset. The next day, the cops were called, and then, there was an accident, and the bargaining team was called back into the table. Like, it just happened so quickly. But the moment was quite important, and I see because all the unions saw that when we all got together, what could happen? This was a group of about, I think, at least 60 or 70 that came out. Jeff was there. 60 or 70 who came out for a group of 12. 4 were in the bargaining team, so only 8 could be out. Like, so that's the. So I've kind of like, and this is the. I've spoken through this actually. These are the points that I'm we went from issues of housing to labor to research, of course, all the while still doing our union work, which is being representatives for people for grievances, talking about, because that was also where your strength is. So we looked at every avenue in which, all of us felt supported, and we had a lot of ground level organizing that happened. Like, there were a lot of events. The union was flush with money because of the pandemic, and when I became president, I was like, no, this money is going to be invested back into institutional, let's bring people in, let's have events, so over the summer, we had like potlucks, we had, and those spaces we had like a week-long academic worker celebration week, what we call, just made up reasons, but just to get people into the same here. Free food, come and start talking to each other. There were events, there were situations where somebody realized that their supervisor had been, issues with their supervisor, which was sorted. Like, there were other things that were happening that we didn't realize. It was not only labor, it was also relation to their studies, what they had access to. They were having conversations among them to know who was being paid, how much. It suddenly brought people together in spaces that they didn't realize it before. And a lot of people just basically said that, oh, we didn't feel this before. And this was the space that really it happened. Now, all of this kind of came up, this, I think, brought the sentiment to where people were willing to go on strike. Without this build-up and all of this work, where then the perception and the feeling is that, within the ground level, within the mobilization team, where everyone was involved, that they were part of the union, and they were taking forward the work of the union in each department, was, I think, where it culminated into the strike. And it was only possible because the talks were happening, the fights were happening at the department level and at the union level. Now, the strike was, this I'm speaking a little bit not with full experience of being part, as a member in it. I just want to put that caveat in. But it was the first major strike on campus. The engineers went out for a week or a few days, I think. But this was big because this was students, right? Students striking, who has that, it was it was also just before their final exams of the undergrads. So it was a little tricky, but because, your bargaining power also reduces the minute the exams, the time period gets over. So this was a tricky, but it was impactful for the time that it happened. It also, I think, the most important thing, which historically will stay, and that will be, set for the next round of bargaining, is that it politicized students. I found Western extremely apolitical when I came in. I think it still is, but suddenly, where you stood, the idea that the university is behind you and will support you in times of struggle, suddenly like, no, but in action, like, what did you do? You didn't come back to the table. Professors or, deans or positions of power had to respond a certain way from the university because suddenly the structures were apparent. So being nice, being friends, and being part of this thing suddenly didn't mean much because you were structurally in that position and that brought it out. So this, I think, it was a very important education, especially, and I was so happy for all the first years, who had 5 years to go and in the, and I think one of the major things, and this I saw is the learning that happens within campuses. So QP came and did a walk around of the strike office, looked at all of the ways in which that shifts were organized. QP would have their own staff, PSCC also has their own way of doing it, but each local will have its own understanding of their own situation and will take it forward a certain way. And I think 610 did a fantastic job in terms of just logistically organizing for the strike. 2,000 members, rain, insane weather I think they had, like it was terrible. I was actually in some way so happy that like, oh, I had to come for like half an hour and then go back, but I was just like, people stood there and I, so that was what, so I think QP also figured that out and learned from it. Now, yeah, I'm just going to conclude and can ask questions and all of that later, but the point that I want to make is that the idea of what you can do is, I think, limited by neoliberalism. It's what, like, it sort of gives you a very limited way in which you can look at resistance. And I think that is what we have to fight. And I think you can only take it like, let's say with 610 in the last couple of years, we've taken it from here to here. But I'm hoping that someone else will come and say, no, all unions can come together on campus and do a wildcat strike. Like, imagine that, right? That is an imagination that we have to work towards. It's work. It's actual on-ground conversations, and that is how you communicate and how you build solidarity. Yeah, thank you.